Welcome to Small Town Tales, a podcast where we hear stories of the paranormal, haunting legends, and all things spirit. Join us as we explore the unknown. Now, here's your host, C.L. Thomas.
Voodoo Queen Bloody Mary is the owner of Bloody Mary New Orleans Haunted Museum and Voodoo Pharmacy. She and her mystic staff give city tours, seances, psychic readings, and ghost hunting events while operating from a 200-year-old haunted house. Bloody Mary has been featured on Ghost Adventures, Paranormal Lockdown, and BuzzFeed Unsolved. Here to talk about NOLA spirits, ghouls, and mayhem in the French Quarter. Mary, thank you for being a guest on the show today, and I'm really excited to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I hear you are a victim. You're a repeat offender at the museum. Yes.
I've been to your location several times. I love it. I love it.
I'm glad.
I'm fascinated with your location for many reasons. And I watched you actually restore the building from when I believe it burned down when you first bought it. Is that right?
Well, it didn't burn down. It had a fire. If it burned down, it wouldn't be there. No, it just had a fire. Actually, the fire was not big. The fire caused extensive damage, but it wasn't big. But water damage, the electrical being rewired, it lost a small section of a roof, but it was a lot of work to fix it.
It looked like it was. And I know you were posting videos on the progress.
Yes.
From my understanding.
It was a big mess. Now, as you well know, however, or you should know, or your people should know, is that the number one time for hauntings is generally renovation and anniversaries. And it just so happens that it was both when I came in to try to repair the place was the 10-year anniversary of a very dark incident that happened in the place. So on top of it being an anniversary and the renovation, it kind of did more than open up old wounds with that. I mean, there was utter chaos going on, not only with the physical problems of renovation and old 200-year-old buildings, but the spirit activity as well. So there were lots of spirits. And there still are, but they were all over the place then, Could
you tell us just a little bit of the history of this building?
Sure. It's a 200-year-old complex in the French Quarter, which would have been a townhouse. That's what the French Quarter was. It was the Vieux Carré was a series of townhouses. So there was many buildings that were with the building. The main building, which I am in, there was a boys' quarter later built in 1838, a servants' quarter that seems to be the oldest one, or a slaves' quarter. There was a carriage house and stables in the back and an outside kitchen and a big, huge, beautiful courtyard. All of this was the entire building. And with the exception of the outside kitchen, we have all the buildings intact, which is rare. That's also something that helps spirits stay when you don't destroy a lot of the property, right? The buildings are still all there, even though one of them, fell down and there's some beautiful oak trees at its place. But in general, most of the buildings are there. So they're still on the old floor plan, which is one reason that renovation pisses them off sometimes, or at least confuses them. It's like you're busting up their joint. You're messing with their territory. It's confusing. Just like when you have a whole bunch of construction crews in your house, it's confusing for you too. So all that was going on while I was trying to repair it, soothe the spirits, and placate City Hall. All of them. I don't know. I think City Hall was the worst, frankly.
Yeah,
but,
probably.
Red tape of different types. But it was also the 10-year anniversary of a very dark incident that happened in the house. Now, first of all, realize there's 200 years of life and death there. So we have lots of spirits. We have at least 13 that we know by name and many others that come back and forth throughout some of the haunted artifacts that I brought in. I designed the place as a safe place for any of the spirits of New Orleans to keep their stories alive, to give them a place like a sanctuary. They could come and go. And I do believe that spirits come and go. And I have haunted artifacts from a lot of the important places. And I wanted to keep some of the stories alive now more than ever because we're at jeopardy of losing a lot of our stories and our people since Katrina. It's like a whole new New Orleans. So that was the purpose of building the place. I had a ghost photo gallery and a spirit realm little mini museum behind the Voodoo Museum before Katrina. And it kind of went to go, so to speak, from Katrina till finding a new place. And I had pretty much given up on finding a new place until this kind of happened. There was the Voodoo Spiritual Temple that was there for many, many years before that. The fire happened when she owned it. And it was earlier that same year, and that would have been 2015, right? 2016. I can't do. Yeah, 2016. Sorry. 2016. And then she moved to a different location down Rampart on the other end. So I wasn't there when the fire started. I just came in to try to fix it after. But she was there for quite a long time. And then there was another voodoo priest there before her. So that makes me like the third voodoo priest that we know of.
Right.
That has to do with that building, which is kind of interesting in itself if you think about it, right? So there has been, but it was an older building, and it would have been a townhouse where the family would have come when they weren't working at their whatever buildings they had, plantations or their farms, and it would have been in the French Quarter. So you have, I say probably it was about the end of the 19th century when these one family multi-structured buildings turned into like individualized apartments or, to different people. It changed because the French Quarter became a big slum after the Civil War. And it was about, by the way, 85% Sicilian. So little Palermo took over the French Quarter. And so, then there was a lot of apartments and people in and out.
Right.
So that leaves potential for thousands of people who lived and died there to come back and be our visitors. And you do not, contrary to popular opinion, have to die in a place in order to haunt it. However, there were some people that sort of kind of died in the place, at least one, that we know of in 2006, a year after Katrina. There was a devastating mark on the city, which made a blood print on the building, a story known as Zack and Addie.
Yes. Could you tell us about Zack and
I will tell you about it, and I know how you have your own thought on it, but it's not the way they put it out there is generally not the way to. First of all, it had nothing to do with the building. Okay? Zero. They had not even lived there 2 days when this happened. Okay? They were just moving in. Their boxes weren't even unpacked.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
That's what I said. Nobody seems to pay attention they hadn't. This was not their home. They had not unpacked. Like they had just gotten there. She wanted to get rid of him off the lease. There was a fight. He strangled her, and then the aftermath of that. So barely, not even 48 hours, not even 36 hours. But when this happened, and then he stayed there for another 2 weeks while he got rid of the evidence. His choice was to take her body into the bathtub, chop her up with a pocket knife and a handsaw, store her in the fridge, and cook her on the oven, but he didn't eat her. So sex, drugs, and rock and roll was definitely part of this. There was a lot of recreational drugs.
Yeah.
There was a lot of PTSD in the city itself because of Katrina, but it wasn't from, as you put it, a mysterious stranger in the building. And it wasn't from voodoo spirits that they tried to make it be about on certain TV shows that were there because of the temple. It was everything about what they brought with them into the building. New Orleans was a hellhole at that point. A year after Katrina was the worst. And I lived through it every step of the way. And I was even in that building the day after it happened. I mean, the darkness was everywhere that you turned. And our good ghosts, the regular ghosts, the founders, the builders, the protectors of the town, they were gone.
Yeah.
We were flatlined ghost town of a different variety. And that let the dark side run free, almost like a living entity. There was no light side to balance it. Even the dark craves the light. And everybody were potential victims because everyone was a freaking mess. We had what we called, everybody went Katrina crazy, but it was a form of PTSD. And the crime rate was higher than it had ever been before in history. We were still under martial law a year later. We're still under curfew. Everything was just at its worst. And this is when they got kicked out of their apartment. And this is when they moved upstairs to that small apartment.
And that's when it happened.
Yeah, he snapped.
I lived down there in New Orleans for about 8 months right after Katrina because I was covering it at the time. So I know what you're talking about. It was very dark.
It was very eerie and very dark and very flatlined. And I don't know how sensitive you are or not, but basically, even though it felt like empty, I still was looking over my shoulder all the time, like there was something there and it was big. I just wasn't looking low enough. It was creeping around on the ground. It wasn't anthropomorphic. It wasn't an entity that was humanoid or demonized or anything. It was just this living, blech, and it was feeding, and we were the food. And Zack and Addie were prime candidates. They had a lot of drugs in them. You know, there was some anger, there were some fights, there were some problems. All I did for 3 years after Katrina was banishings, exorcisms, cleansings on people, places, and things.
Did you have to clean that house out when you first got it?
Like 100,000 times, sure. Of course I did, and I'm not the only one. I'm sure the people there did before. Yes, of course. Even in the show that you supposedly watched that I was in, I was cleansing it right in front of your face. But yes, all the time, regular basis. So yes, we did a spiritual cleansings, feedings to nurture the good spirits. Yes, I mean, that's what I do as a voodoo priestess. I do cleansings for people. If I didn't do it on my own place, I would be severely negligent. No, of course I did. And that's what I do for people. Tell them how to do cleansing baths, cleanse their house, go around and do different things. And, we do some bigger rituals yearly, a couple times a year, and then little ones either with different oils or herbs or smudges. Depends on what it is. We mix it up. So yes, we did a lot of cleansings. I have been called the necrotherapist. So I also believe in individual counseling, healing, kind of with the spirits,
Right.
So there's been some of that. It's not like TV and, go send them into the light stuff. They'll come right back and bounce back from that light if they're not ready to face their own darkness. You've got to face everything when you're ready to do things. And also, I believe that you could cross over and come back, that heaven's not a jail. You go back and forth as well. So the Addie in particular, we've done a lot of work with, and she's healing quite nicely, and she's a growing spirit, and she wants to help others. And the Me Too movement really helped with that. Our counseling's helped in that. Hearing her side of the stories helped from that, because people had a really bad habit at the beginning of blaming her. And that is what I call some serious bad juju. You do not blame the victim. But people were doing it. I don't know, it was just his drug buddies or other things. You don't blame the victim. They said, she should have known better than to make him angry because he was a veteran. Well, that does not fly. That does not fly at all. It was not her fault. They even had somebody wrote a song that said, Addie, it's not your fault. It's a pretty cool song, actually. And she had to know that. She didn't even believe that he really did it. When we got there, she was very flustered. But now that she wants you to know that she was more than just this incident, she was a dancer, and she was many, many things. And she wants you to know that they really did have true love at one point. And so she's growing. He's got a lot more karma to deal with, obviously. There's murder and suicide in there. So sometimes he's brooding, and sometimes he's flirtatious, and sometimes he's quiet, and sometimes he's going back through the motions, and he will give an occasional grab ass to people that come in there. So there's still some of that. And they both get Jägermeister and whiskey sometimes, and he gets certain music that I play to calm him down, and stories that are told, and different people have come in to sit with him and talk with him, and over the years, and things are changing. He's not quite ready to face everything yet, but he's better than he was. Those are two of our spirits, but there's at least 13 that we know by name, including like some young children that had been there and witnessed by 40, 50 years of tenants, and some other ones that have popped up now.
That's what I was going to, don't you have a child spirit that hangs around there?
Two, at least from 3 to 23. We have 3 regular ones that we know by name, and another dozen or more that come from certain orphanage items that I have, and wheelchairs that came out of hospitals from children. So we have 2 for sure that we know came with the building, 3 that probably came from the building, Michael, Abe, and Annabelle. And then we have a whole bunch others that come through some of the other haunted items. So my 13, I count the ones that seem to be with the building. And the others that come through the artifacts, I don't count in that 13. But sometimes you bring a spirit with you. and it stays behind for a couple of days, hangs out, and goes. So, there's a fluctuating, grouping of them in there. And then there's people we see in the courtyard, and then there's ghost animals. We got a couple of ghost cats. We got a ghost horse, So we have all sorts.
Oh, wow. Well, what are some of the haunted objects that you have at your house, and where did they come from?
Well, they're in the museum, most of them, and they came from all over the place. There isn't, haunted objects are us. They find me, either they're donated, or sometimes people are afraid of some things, or I have had them passed down in the family to this family connections, or I go out and search specifically for a piece of this building or that building or something to have a connection. If the spirits that I deal with on a regular basis want to come through, they will have something there that they can use as a bridge to do so. So I have a slate from the top of Lafitte's blacksmith shop bar. I have a nail from the roof of the LaLaurie mansion. I have a brick from the old fort, and I have another brick from a graveyard. I have different things from different places. I have artifacts that belong to Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, which help me ritually heal from my voodoo priestess side, as well as help keep her story alive. So I have things that I consciously go get from places, earth from some of the levee breaches at Katrina. I have all kinds of things. I'm trying to anchor them in there. The whole idea of haunted artifacts is that they contain the residual energy of the person or place in which they came, and then like a bridge that can carry them back in, or can wheel it back in. So that's the idea. Plus, I have a lot of haunted dolls, and I love dolls, and I make voodoo dolls, but I have haunted dolls as well. And I recently, as of like a few weeks ago, redid my haunted attic, which is the matching twin-sized side apartment, which I used to use just as a private reading room, into my haunted attic and tea room, where you can adopt haunted dolls and different haunted artifacts that I have up there and continue to investigate if you want to on your own, as well as do it as a private reading room or tea room. So I've got stuff now, because everybody always wanted to buy my stuff. Like, no, this is my stuff. Either I've gifted it to the children, I'm not going to take it back, because I buy a lot of gifts for the kids, or I have different items that are gifts for the spirits, because there's a lot of voodoo altars there. You don't give it and take it away,
right?
But I went out and been searching all year for dolls that needed a home, so I call it my adoption center. I just set that up in the other side of the attic, so it's got oddities and mystic art and haunted items, little haunted items to adopt out, sort of.
Interesting. Well, what goes into adopting a haunted doll?
I don't know yet.
Is there like an application or something that goes with this?
I could make one, but no, I don't have one. I don't have one. I guess I should ask, huh?
You should. It's kind of a big deal.
That they would reach out to the right people. Now, I have a couple of people that I've sold haunted dolls to in the past that I got to know over the years, and they were the first ones that called. But I didn't think of an application, just more to do. But I wanted them to come and feel which one is right for them, So your museum is also listed as a pharmacy, where people can get spiritual herbs and mixes and different things. Sure. I make most of my own spirit tools. I've been teaching other people how to do this for almost 30 years, and make my own gree bags and mojo bags and awaken and bless the herbs. And I do make candles, and I burn candles for people. I make specialty custom voodoo dolls for love, money, travel, whatever it is you're after. So a long time ago in New Orleans and in the South, it was common for you to go into your pharmacy to buy voodoo potions, powders, dolls, and charms. So I did not make up the concept of voodoo pharmacy. This was something that was historically part of. After the Civil War, when everything kind of went underground more here, it was not uncommon to go purchase some of these things in your voodoo pharmacy, maybe even right before, the Civil War. Before that, you might go directly to your priestess and ask for something one-on-one to be made. So that's kind of what I would do, though I have some things that I make that, that I make many of that you can purchase. But I do a lot of custom stuff, too. So bones, baubles, potions, powders, dolls, herbs, all that kind of stuff is there, as well as other spirit tools, everything from paranormal devices like K2 meters to many Ouija boards, divination, runes, bone set throwing, which is animal bones, by the way, and all different kinds of divination techniques. And I'm really big into alligator and gator magic and swamp magic. So there's a lot of gator parts and other parts too. It is always the Latin Catholic areas that had more of the voodoo and hoodoo developed. They had a few more freedoms for the slaves than the American colonies did. Slavery is always oppression, but it was different here, and it openly grew side by side with the culture where everyone dabbled in an aspect of it in one form or another. So Catholicism was the official religion until 1803 Louisiana Purchase. You were pretty much Catholicized as a slave or anyone that wanted to live here officially. But as long as you went to church on Sunday, you could do your voodoo rituals at Congo Square in your backyard relatively freely up until around the time of the Civil War. But you couldn't do anything when we were occupied, no matter who you were, right?
Right.
So, but definitely we always had the voodoo and the hoodoo going on here. And since it was under Catholicism, they saw the similarities. They loved the saints and realized, well, if this saint is for this area of one's life, it might give an embodiment to our spirit, voodoo or Loa, and made an interchange. Everyone says they were just hiding what they were doing behind a veneer of Christianity, but I do not think they really had to hide it. At least not here.
Right.
And they made this connection. So yes, the saints are part of the New World form of voodoo, and Christianity already had inroads in Africa before the slave trade. So that was already somewhat introduced. And they love to invite new ideas in and come in. So they had already looked and seen how this could all adapt. And then again, in the New World, they were Catholic, so they went to church, but they did novenas and they had rosaries, and the Catholics lit candles. The Catholics had parade and costumery. The Catholics weren't against dancing or music, which is the most important part.
Got it.
Because it was a dance religion and a musical religion. And most of the American colonies did not allow dancing or fraternization between slaves that weren't on the same plantation. That was not a rule here. We tried not to even break up slave families, and if they were sold as a unit. So cultural ideas and oral histories remained more intact.
Got it.
So things were different here, but Catholicism was blended in, and you will see the saints on voodoo altars to this day. But you will also see that in Brazil and in Cuba and in Haiti and in many other areas where there's a different form of voodoo that developed in the New World.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Voodoo Queen Bloody Mary will tell us about some of the haunted locations around the French Quarter.
You're listening to Small Town Tales with stories of the paranormal, haunting legends, and all things spirit with your host, C.L. Thomas. Come join C.L. Thomas at the Las Vegas Para-Unity Convention this December at the MGM Grand Conference Center, showcasing the biggest names in the supernatural and cryptid aspects of the paranormal field, along with the horror as well as the comic book field. Go to VegasParaUnity.com. That's VegasParaUnity.com.
And we are back. Our special guest, Voodoo Queen Bloody Mary, is here to tell us some stories about spirits she has been in contact with, as well as some of the ghost stories around the French Quarter. Now, you give tours around New Orleans just about every night, don't you?
Oh, yeah, as long as there's people here.
Can you tell us about some of the locations you visit in the history?
Sure. Well, I was one of the founder companies of this and doing cemetery tours and ghost tours. Now, the French Quarter which is really known as the Vieux Carré, is the old town. So it's got the oldest buildings. So it's got the oldest stories. But it's not the only neighborhood that has ghosts. Like my house. My house is in Mid-City, and it's been on Ghost Adventures and a whole bunch of different TV shows as well. So I have ghosts in my own personal haunted house. I'm in the America's Encyclopedia of Haunted Houses, but I'm in the private sector. Most people that we bring to haunted houses, it's in the public center where everything's concentrated together in the French Quarter or Vieux Carré. And that's where we go on a more regular basis. But I also go to cemeteries, and we go to the haunted park out in the woods, and we go into my house, and we go into, by the waters. So there's all sorts of other areas. But the most classic places would be where I've met my walking tours for many years, decades, would be Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Bar. It was once run by Jean Lafitte, brother Pierre, and Dominique Yu. It was a private townhouse because the French Quarter was a series of townhouses, and a private club, and where the Baratarian privateers met, and so much history is made. So there's modern ghosts and colonial ghosts and everything in between. And I have had thousands of encounters with Jean Lafitte and his cohorts. And actually, I don't know if you read my book, but it's Hauntings, Horrors, and Dancing with the Dead. I've got great detailed information, not only on the history, but my personal experience, as well as other experiences and different ways of how to connect and what to do to cleanse. It's got everything in it. But Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Bar is my all-time favorite bar in New Orleans, and very, very haunted. But not just with the Lafitte brothers. They were just there first. So there's them. And there's the eyes in the fireplace that show where they think that Jean Lafitte may have hidden a treasure long ago. And then there's more modern ghosts in there as well. I call it the ghost watering hole, because if it's the oldest bar in the country, they don't need a GPS to keep coming back. Spirits love spirits. You will see liquor all over my museum, and it's not for you, and it's not for the tourists. It's for the spirits.
Was that fireplace the actual blacksmith fire?
Maybe. That's not really what a smithy looks like. It depends. There is a huge old bellows in there, and there were many other bellows in there that show that they would have some form of smithing that went in the property. But generally, a blacksmith fireplace would have looked a little bit different than that. So they might have had something more outside. The debate of whether they actually made the blacksmithing there or not still goes on, though he was a merchant. He was a merchant blacksmith, and in Barataria Bay, he had many, including himself, blacksmiths listed on his rosters, and that might have been where they moved it in and out. There was some tinsmithing there later going on, and a variety of other kinds of smithing. But it was called the blacksmith shop. Others say maybe the blacksmithing was outside because of the tremendous amount of heat that was right. You wouldn't want it in your living quarters. So, but there was a bellows just about as tall and bigger than me, that we have up in the attic that I've done some work with spirit-wise. And it was ancient on this big arm right in front of that particular smithy. So either way, I don't think there's gold under there because I keep looking. But I think maps and other things. All sorts of treasure in Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Bar. So that's a very popular one. And of course, the most known and most popular one with a little boost given from American Horror Story would be the LaLaurie Mansion on Royal Street, the ghost house on Royal, which was built in 1831 by my great-great-great-great aunt, Emily Truss Clare, who was giving 3 lots, that was originally part of the Ursuline Convent property. When she made 15 and she was about ready to get married, she was given those lots as her dowry gift. And her husband, to be Mr. Sonia Dufasset, built the mansion, and then at the last minute decided not to live there and sold it to the LaLauries. My personal house that I'm sitting in right now is on the back of the plantation property that her brother and her both had investment in. So this was the McCartay plantation. So I'm surrounded by LaLaurie energy. But my family's been here for 300 years.
Wow.
When you've been in a place that long, you're bound to have connections, since it was a very small town back then, right? Mm-hmm. So I've seen a lot of those connections in real estate deals. But the best find was finding out that, hey, my bloodline built that damn place. I have a huge chapter in my book on that. I also helped write her biography, with Carolyn's biography. I helped to go do a little bit of research with her, Carolyn Long's biography on her book. But I've got a huge section about the spirit activity and stuff. And I met Madame LaLaurie's spirit, not only there, but in many places, including Paris. So I've traced her story all the way through Europe and back, and had a bloodline connection. And I've done at least 5 different exorcisms on people who snuck in there, worked there, or even were cordially invited in, who they think and know that Madame LaLaurie got into them. So I have a lot of personal stake in that story, as well as know the great history. Basically, just long story short, is she was accused of torturing her slaves. She was run out of town on a rail, pretty much. She escaped, never having to go to any form of justice on that. She never understood why she could not return. She spent the rest of her days in Paris, always wanting to come back home and not really getting, like a true narcissist, not really getting why she could not. And then she was eventually shipped back after her death and sent back to her native soil. And the stories get more dramatic every night. But there's some great history to validate her abuse on the slaves. The story was that she was this wonderful socialite, she was with such a good family. She was connected to everyone. How could this poor, beautiful little woman possibly do such a thing? The story was not Kathy Bates. She was not happy about Kathy Bates being given that role. I knew that she wouldn't be. She was a hot cougar. She was Demi Moore, Courtney Cox. That's what she wanted. That's what she wants to be remembered as. She's got an ego that won't die, So the story was different. There was in American Horror Story said that she had a great connection to Marie Laveau. That is not known and probably not happening at all. There was no murders involved with it. There was no, Marie Laveau was not dating one of her slaves. She was married to a white man on the other side of town at that particular point. So they just took some of the more important or more scandalous people out of history of that town and made them as knowing each other. And they were in different social circles. Let's put it at that.
About New Orleans. And every time I hear different stories, I don't know what to believe.
Yeah. Well, that's because probably because you're doing everything on the internet. It goes quicker with rumor on the internet than it did by Anna. But I mean, I've known that story since I was a kid. She was in the wax museum that we went to on field trips. You heard the story before that in school. So I've heard much earlier stories, plus, of course, researched some of the original oral history that was recorded about the story, comparing it to today. And lots of things have changed. But the internet's made things change so much quicker. People can write whatever they want. Nobody knows fact checks, And people, unfortunately,
she gets all the blame, but wouldn't Dr. Louis?
No, I don't believe. No, I don't believe that.
You think so?
That's not my opinion. No. He might have known what was going on. They had already broken up. He wasn't even living in the house at the time.
Oh,
he was living in a different city. But I mean, he did end up on the scene when the fire broke out. But they had a technical separation of bed and board. He was not the all powerful older doctor. He was 20 years younger than her that wanted a place in town. He was a doctor, by the way, who was his goal was to fix hunchbacks. That was his specialty. So fixing crooked backs and things like that. So she might have had an assistant, perhaps one of her slaves, perhaps not. But I am of the lone woman theory, especially since the majority of the problems seem to be towards women and children. And some of those women and children seem to be the ex-lovers and bastard offspring of her previous husband. So there's more to the story than, not that excuses anything at all.
Plot thickens.
Yes. And there's never one reason. There's many, many reasons. So plus she was a psychopathic narcissist and a variety of other things too. But yeah, it's not just one reason. So people start doing the whole, doctor and wife team thing, but there was no evidence of that ever. And he was still here practicing he came back, I think, once or twice. His son had the same name as him. She went back to France with him and lived with his parents for a while till the money ran out, and so did he.
Is she haunting people in the afterlife now? Is she causing problems?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, sure. Sometimes problems, sometimes just entertainment. I suppose it depends on the night, just like in life. Sometimes entertainment, sometimes problems, She's talked about every night. She takes her bows, let's put it that way. Different people in the house have had experiences. Others say nothing at all happened. A haunted house isn't haunted every minute of the day. And when places are haunted, not everyone gets the same experience. It depends on you. However, they are making a new Hollywood film right now. The same people that made The Conjuring are doing a script inside there. So there'll even be more fake stuff coming out about that.
Wait.
But, yeah, I mean, the American Horror Story just didn't get the story right. You know, like they tried to make it too, I don't know, it wasn't the true story. Obviously, I mean, the whole thing was a lot of it was made up, but yeah, there was a lot more going on there. And there always is than meets the eye. You know, there was a bit of torture. There was a bit of abuse for sure. Motivations might have been different than many think. Either way, she shouldn't have done it. But she never understood how she did anything wrong.
Yeah, that's a true psychopath. Can you tell us what's going on with St. Louis Cemetery number 1?
It is closed, and we are all very upset that we have not been able to get back in. I have been going in there for 30 years on tours and have family members in there, and I've been going in there off and on at different parts of my life long before, I had a tour company. They may reopen. There is no plans or knowledge of what's going on right now. Originally, when they closed it, they said they were going to reopen. We all had contracts that we had to pay not all of us, but some of us, pay a certain amount of money and a certain amount of insurance to take people in. I just don't think they couldn't figure out an easy way to do it during COVID to protect all their employees, because there was a check-in system and a monitoring system, and there was just too many people in there. I mean, it got busier once they start charging to get in than before. I guess when you make it taboo, like you can't go in. Oh, we want to go in. But now it's just sitting there all isolated. Now I've gone in now and then. I can make an appointment because I have family in there. If I want to make an appointment, they'll take me in, but I can't take you. Well, maybe I could if you had a lot of money. But basically, they're not, not letting the public. They don't want tourists in. Tourists.
That's interesting. I remember going in there all the time, and I think it was last year I noticed you couldn't do that anymore. Last time I was in there.
COVID closed it in March. Before that, you had to go in with a licensed tour company with insurance that was registered and accepted. And I was one of those companies. However, now nobody could go in. I mean, I could go in as a family member with an appointment. And, that's not usually how it works. It's like if I go in there, it's like, oh, I have time. I'm going to go visit today. Not time to make an appointment, set it up, And then the locals could go in on November 1st. So I went there then too. So some people say they might be doing it themselves and have scripted guides. Some people say they might hire an outside monitor to take of it. Some say they might not open at all. So they are not verifying any of these rumors. I'm relatively friendly with a couple of the people that are in charge at the Archdiocese. And they said, yeah, they're aware of all the rumors, but they don't know any of it.
Wow.
St. Louis 2 has reopened only on Sundays. And I was one of the few people that ever toured St. Louis 2 anyway. And I've always toured, long before the rest of the companies, the tours in Mid-City out here where I live for the past 30 years. Only last summer, I guess, not even last summer, last winter, did other tours start to come out here where they realized St. Louis wasn't going to open. But my family's out here, and I've been touring out here for 30 years, and I've had a literal lifetime of experience of playing hide and seek in these places. So I've got lots of old stories about the cemeteries out here, and I love them, But tourists only know about St. Louis 1. And tourists also think we don't do below ground burial. All that's a bunch of bull. All that's what people that aren't from here think. I can show you a hole dug in the ground every single day, It depends on what style you want. So the cemeteries have their share of spirit activity. So do the old buildings. And I guess a big one that everybody's loving right now is a charity hospital. It's empty since Katrina. And it's recently started to get some renovation as of last December. So that's opening some new wounds. And they're thinking about turning that into a multi-use building, not a hospital again.
Got it.
And I've got a very haunted wheelchair from that place, which brings so many spirits through. It's a big old, you might have seen it in there, the old 1930s style. But
yes, I've seen that.
Still in use in the charity hospital when it closed in 2005.
Do you know a specific story attached to that chair?
Not like it came with a tag, no. But I have had lots of specific stories since then. There's particular, it did not come with a bio, but it did come with a very angry spirit, child spirit, it seems, who was a little off mentally and has scratched some people on their arms pretty severely once or twice. The cat also likes the chair, so that's kind of another. There's a nurse that comes with it, a couple of different people that have come through it on the chair. It's from the chair itself. And the one girl, she looks like she was very, much abused in life. But she didn't have quite a normal mind, so she's very hard to get a full beat on, but she's scared. And when anyone comes at it too quick or whatever, they might feel something like a pull or someone holding on to their arms. And one time a woman got very scratched. You could see that video, I believe, on my app, because I have a full haunted museum tour that you could look up, Bloody Mary tour, on the App Store, and you can do the whole thing and not have to be in New Orleans. So you could do that. Awesome. And I think I have a little video clip up at the top of the woman that got scratched. And interestingly enough, in real life, she was a detective who was always called in when children were abused and had to take the children away and bring them to child services or the hospital or wherever it was. So she said it was very interesting that that's what was going on the chair, because that's what her life was during the day. So I think the girl spirit recognized that kind of energy around her and just held on and scratched at the same time. So, that's at least one story. And one whole floor of the charity hospital was like a children's wing, an orphanage wing, and there was also a mental wing. So there was all sorts of things attached with it, so not just one story, but many. When it had been used from 1930 to 2005. So that's 75 years of people using that chair and having some connection to it,
That's one thing about paranormal, is you pick up all these really sad stories from people.
Yes, you can. But if you try, you can also pick up really happy stories and beautiful love stories and stories that help fill you with hope. So contraire that there is a very dark story attached to my museum, that has never, ever been my focus. My focus, though, is to heal. And I was starting to work with a lot of abused women, murdered women, raped women on the other side, who kind of all came up together marching right before the whole Me Too thing. And they wanted to be heard. And somehow I became part of that. And so did Addie Hall. But before that, I'm always the one that said, you don't have to die in a place to haunt a place. It's about where you lived at, where you grew up, where you went to school, favorite vacation spots. Everything you do is like leaving a trail of astral breadcrumbs. The more emotion, good or bad, the bigger the pile, the easier it is to get back to. So I have some fabulous spirits of different styles that have taught me so many things, not just about the dark side, the evil struggles. That's what you'll hear on all horror movies. But
yes, and that's a misconception about voodoo as well, is it not? Everyone wants to hear about voodoo dolls and black magic. And
well, that's the same thing with anything, with witchcraft, with anything like that. They always want to hear the more dramatic. Mm-hmm. And that's because the way they were trained, that was the way they're trained. And I am not going to tell you that doesn't exist, or those things do exist. But in every religion, there's people that abuse power and try to take it from others, which is really not at all what the religion is about. But that is, unfortunately, what a lot of human nature is about. And these religions are all run by humans. They might have the big God overhead, but in the long run, it's the humans trying to aspire to be better. And that's what voodoo would be. It's a dance religion and a musical religion that is very nature dependent and ancestral reverent and deity friendly. And you work with them and you feed them and you dance and you listen to the ancestors, listen to the Loa or the spirits. And I think we just forget that it's too pompous, too arrogant humans are. We were not here first. There were many things here before and many other realms and dimensions around us that we should work together with instead of run in fear from. Fear is a 4-letter word.
I love that. Is there any specific thing that you want to teach if someone's just now getting into voodoo or wants to learn more about it? What would you recommend for them?
I would say for you to find a teacher, find someone that wants to take you under their wing. That's harder than not in some little isolated areas. But, read a couple of books, read about the spirit religions that are around you or your family or your bloodline or your town, as well as other religions. Always try to bring the ones that you were brought up around first, and then read and try to connect with the spirits on the others. There's a huge clash of cultures in this country right now. Usually more, I'm assuming, more people that didn't have an early introduction to this, like maybe more north, I'm not sure, that are trying to segregate the religion of voodoo. Even though everyone knows it had an African source, when it came to the New World, it blended in with the local Native American, Indian, indigenous population, as well as the European, you might say, folk magic traditions. And it did all blend. But yeah, definitely just read about it. Just read about it first and, meditate, light a candle, do a journal, pay attention to your dreams. Spirits are still talking direct. They will give you messages. Your ancestors will give you messages. You just have to learn to turn off the beta brainwaves, to tune out all the distractions from this life, all your bills, all your neighbors, all the problems, and just open up and be the channel to get the information direct from Spirit. For Spirit and God has not stopped talking, though many modern religions want to make you think they have.
Got it. Well, Voodoo Queen Bloody Mary, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. I really appreciated you.
You are quite welcome, and you can find out some stuff at BloodyMaryNewOrleans.com on my website, or get my books. I've got a couple of new ebooks, and older ebooks redone, and a couple of hardcover ones too.
I will definitely get them.
Come to New Orleans. Come to New Orleans. Yes. Come visit. You too. Come back.
I'll be back. I'll be back soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.